The Green Party's finish in the federal election was historic, a record 3 seats won in Parliament, but it fell short of some expectations. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth May announced she would step down as party leader after serving in that role since 2006. Since then, the party grew from a grassroots movement to a viable contender in Canadian politics. So what does the party need to do to win over more Canadians and catapult the Greens into official party status in Parliament? Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Ontario Greens. He joins us from Guelph, Ontario. David Kuhn is the leader of the New Brunswick Greens, and he's joining us from Fredericton. And Peter Bevan-Baker is the leader of the PEI Green Party and leader of the official opposition. He joins us from the Charlottetown Legislature. Hello to all three of you. Thanks for making time for us.
Good evening.
Good evening, Vashi.
Appreciate it very much. I think first off, it's my responsibility to ask each of you if any of you are considering running for the federal party leader. Any takers?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so that was easy. Mr. Bevan-Baker, why don't I start with you? Was it the right decision for Miss May to step down?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Elizabeth has been carrying the weight of the federal party more or less single-handedly for 13 years now. And all of us present on the screen now know how difficult it is to lead a party. When you don't have a caucus with you, it's doubly difficult. So I think for her personally, it was the right thing. I also think for the party, I mean, there are natural cycles, there are endings and there are beginnings, and 13 years is a long time to lead any federal party. So I think this gives the Greens an opportunity to bring forward somebody new, somebody fresh, and to give us an opportunity in the next federal election that we don't have.
Mr. Kuhn, when you look back at the campaign, and of course in New Brunswick there were a certain set of circumstances, at least at the initial stages of the campaign with the NDP and the Greens, but when you look back at the campaign, what do you think the biggest challenge for the federal Green Party was?
Well, it's a big, complicated country, and once it started being portrayed as kind of a horse race, then the Greens and Elizabeth increasingly found it, I think, more difficult to get the kind of coverage that was necessary to get the message out to Canadians.
And what about you, Mr. Schreiner? What do you think the biggest challenge in the campaign was? If you were to sort of take away a lesson for the next election, which of course could be not that far away, what do you think it would be for the federal party?
Well, I think one of the challenges Greens face is whenever the party becomes mudslinging back and forth between the old traditional parties, it makes it harder for new parties to break through, particularly a party like the Greens. It's really focused on vision, values, and policies. And so Elizabeth, I think did a great job of running a positive campaign, putting forward a vision for the country, talking about the urgency of the climate crisis. But it's hard sometimes to break through the mudslinging from the other parties.
Mr. Bevan-Baker, let me ask you about the system as it stands and how you think moving forward the Green Party can navigate it. And I'm talking specifically about the voting system, so electoral reform and the commentary following the outcome of the election that had there been electoral reform, the outcome might be a bit different, particularly where the Greens and the NDP are concerned. In the absence of that reform, because we see no willingness on the part, for example, of the Liberals to pursue it anymore, how do you think the Green Party better navigates the current system that is?
Well, we've shown in the 3 provinces that you have represented here tonight and in British Columbia that Greens can actually break through in the old system, the first past the post system. That's not to say that the results would be entirely different, both in our own provinces and nationally, had we adopted proportional representation. And I think one of the really sad things that we're facing now, and you hear it every day in the media, is that this is a country divided. And if that we have no representation, there was no support in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan and Alberta for the Liberal Party, and that's not true at all. Of course, many people in those provinces voted for the Liberal Party. And had we had a proportional system, I think you would see a country that's much less divided than it appears to be given the results under the first past the post system.
What about, Mr. Kuhn, I'm sure this is a cliche criticism that you've all heard many times, but the idea that the Green Party needs to position itself as something about more than solely focused on climate. Do you think that criticism should still be leveled? And if so, how do you respond to it?
Well, I think it's really about how effectively a new leader, for example, will be communicating the fundamental values of Greens, the vision for the country, and the fact that we put the well-being of, in the case of the country, Canadians today and future generations of Canadians at the center of everything we do. And we think in terms of the public good and governing for the public good. I think that those things where we put the welfare of our peoples, the health of our environment, and the vitality of our communities at the center of what we do, that's what resonates with Canadians. That's what resonates with New Brunswickers in our case here.
So how, Mr. Schreiner, would the message have shifted in the last campaign if that's the goal? Because I take Mr. Kuhn's point, there were a lot of ideas put forth by the Federal Green Party, particularly where, for example, a basic income is concerned, or free tuition, a host of other things that obviously didn't resonate to the degree that they might have hoped that they would. So what is the takeaway from that?
Well, I think one of the things that elected Greens have proven that Canadians like is that we do politics differently. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we're talking about how do we build the country up instead of tear each other apart. We're more about cooperation and putting the public interest first rather than hyper partisanship. And I think that's what Canadians want in politics. I think that's why, a decade ago, there were no elected Greens. Now you see 18 elected Greens at the provincial and federal level. And I think it's partly because we do politics differently. And I think Canadians want that in the country right now. And I think if we continue to deliver that message both provincially and federally, you're going to continue to see more Greens elected, even with our outdated political system.
Mr. Bevan-Baker, do you think that's enough? Is it just delivering the same message and making sure to emphasize the lack of partisanship, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, I think we're living in unique times with some challenges that we've never faced before, and we just have not done a good job of figuring out ways to live collectively well together in a rapidly changing world. And I think that is where the opportunity for the Green Party lies. I think people have a deep distrust about conventional politics and conventional politicians finding answers to the really wicked problems that we face, whether that be the climate crisis or the disparity in wealth and the burgeoning number of people living in poverty, or the mental health crisis, which I'm sure is as rampant everywhere else as it is here in Prince Edward Island. And they're desperately looking for voices, for leaders, and for a party who is willing to have the honest, tough conversations, to have a vision and a commitment and the courage to talk about those big issues.
Mr. Kuhn, I just have 30 seconds left. Is there a specific person or type of leader that you are hopeful for as your party moves forward?
Well, the leader has to see Canada as bigger than its parts and have a vision to match that and be able to communicate that vision effectively to all peoples in Canada, and that's the key.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I want to thank all three of you very much for making time for us this evening. Thanks to Mike Schreiner, David Kuhn, and Peter Bevan-Baker. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.